Hello everyone. When agreeing to be a guest speaker at this year's Ginposium, little did I ever imagine I would be pre-recording my presentation at home. That said, I would like to thank Nicholas and the Gin Guild for the courage to take the event online and for their support in helping me pull this together. So my presentation is about a mindful innovation approach for Flavoured Gins and the role of botanicals and flavours within this ever-expanding category. The elements I'm going to cover are the state of the gin category and a little bit on the current impact of COVID-19. What is a flavoured gin? What flavour trends are doing well? And finally, a mindful approach to MPD. So let's remind ourselves of how the gin fits into the overall spirits category. Looking at the graph, we can see that gin remains an important sector within the spirits and accounts for 23% of the total spirit sales and driving an overall volume of 72% in the latest year. Gin sales have been strong in the current pandemic, and the impact of COVID-19 on the gin category has potentially potentially to accelerate its sales ahead of other spirits categories, as we feel it plays a part in the occasions driven by those desires to relax, wind down and chill out compared to maybe other spirit categories. But only time will tell with this. This accounts for 35% of the gin sales in terms of value in the latest MAT. Flavoured gins accounted for over 1/3 of the gin sales in the past year and has been the primary driver of gin's growth. So one could state it's firmly established with consumers' repertoire for the consumption of gins. 47% of our flavoured gins growth has been incremental to alcohol sales, and it's driven by those shoppers adding the sector to their repertoire, whilst the majority of the growth has been stolen from other sectors, mainly still wine and unflavoured vodka. But I wanted to ask my question, who is buying these flavoured gins? So looking at the data, in the latest quarter, 91% of flavoured gins growth has been driven by shoppers adding to their repertoire. And most interestingly, those traditionally hard to reach demographics, which apparently are retired and empty nesters, are now driving the penetration increases for flavoured gin. Who would have thought? So perhaps we should be mindful of this demographic when we're next innovating something. So what is flavoured gin? And bear with me, this is legislation I'm reading. There is currently no defined legislation for flavoured gin. So there are technical aspects we must adhere to currently in the UK and EU or within our current gin legislation, which believe me is not the best bedtime read, but it's the EU 2019-787. This permits for gin, one can only add flavoured substances or flavouring preparations to a juniper flavoured spirit, which is produced by flavouring spirit with juniper berries, as long as the juniper taste is predominant. That's clear. For distilled gins, you can add flavouring substances or flavouring preparations to a juniper flavoured spirit drink, which is produced by distilling juniper in the presence of ethyl alcohol, again, as long as the juniper taste is predominant. Finally, a London dry gin can only use natural plant material, which imparts its flavour through distillation with ethyl alcohol, as long as the juniper taste is predominant. Right, this can cause some confusion. Never mind the legislation, but the confusion over the definition. As what's predominant to one person will differ greatly to the next. Hence, in my opinion, there is a real need to create a separate category for flavoured gins, not only to give them their own voice, but protect the current gin category from not getting lost or muddled in its own identity. The data shows quite clearly that flavoured gins are now firmly established, so surely we should as an industry have an agreed definition of what flavoured gin should be. The top 15 blends show that the standard flavours of berries and citrus continue to influence the market, and this is not surprising as they are very much considered mainstream flavours. If we look at the last 12 months, we've seen an increased interest in orange, with many of our big brands adding a variant of orange to their product offering. It's worth remembering that flavour blends have life cycles too. So whether that's the ingredients that are here to stay, which are considered mainstreams, and mainstream means that they've been in the top 20 for at least 5 years, or a key flavour whose flavours have been in the next top 15 for 5 years, Then we've got new flavours that are classified as the fastest growing in the last 3 years. And then finally, these are the ones we want to play around with as new developers. The Holy Grail, which is our emerging flavours, which are considered the fastest 20 in the last year. So there's lots of information out there plotting this information, and it's where having a mindful innovation approach really comes into its own at this point. To understand the undertaking of a mindful approach to innovation, I wanted to explain my understanding of what being mindful means in the context of developing a new recipe. Mindfulness is about awareness and the impartiality about what we gain from this awareness. It's about paying attention on purpose, being considered and conscientious. So when applying this to creating new gin recipes, whether that's for flavoured or not, yes, it's important to look at the relevant flavour trends, but do they actually work within the confines of a gin recipe? Do they blend well with juniper? Does your flavour choice work with a combination of your other ingredients? I've always advocated and endorsed that the ingredients in your gin recipes need to have a role and a place within your organoleptic profile, not to the detriment of the recipe as a whole. Especially if you're doing range extensions, as surely the choice of your flavours used should resonate with the core proposition, so be mindfully innovated and designed. So a word about the role of botanicals and flavours within our flavoured gins. In my opinion, they both have a role to play, and much depends on the choice of the ingredient in your flavoured gin. Yes, the use of botanicals are considered by some to be the holy grail, but sometimes due to the availability of a specific botanical, or the practicalities of your stills, or in fact the flavour intensity that you require for flavoured gins, you have to use flavours. Ideally, you should be using a natural flavour, and for us, I like to use a 95.5 from the named fruit, which means that 95% of the flavouring is derived from the named fruit. So an example is a lemon 95.5. So 95% of that flavour comes from an actual lemon. This also allows for depiction of that flavour on your label, which will help communicate your ingredients to your consumer. Flavoured gins appear to be fully established within the realms of our gin category, based on the data we looked at earlier. We can still utilise the same tools for innovation as traditional gins, i.e. reviewing our flavour trends and finding what works with the choice of ingredients, and also applying a mindful approach to the innovation process, so we don't end up creating flavoured gins that, whilst the key flavour may be on trend, it doesn't resonate with gin. So on a final note, the title of this presentation was The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Well, I was always taught whilst growing up that if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything at all. So I hope my presentation has shown how to approach the innovation of flavoured gins, and as to which ones I think are good, bad and damn right ugly, well,